Greetings, my name is Blaze, and I want to talk about how to properly build your cards. And the way I want to go about this is going to be unique. Instead of telling you what cards to build, I want to talk to you about what's important about cards and how to understand the basic concept of building them. Now, most players will tell you, go ahead and use the card calculator. But if you're brand new to the game, you might not understand how the card calculator works, and even if you do, understanding the base concept of how cards are built and why they're important is something that I think you should start with first. So I definitely think you should look at the card calculator, and there's plenty of tutorials on that. Today, however, I'm going to talk about why it's so important to build your cards and where you should focus. So to begin with, obviously you can go up here to the top right to your menu and you can look at your cards. This will show you the cards you currently have equipped. You also have the ability to go over here and go into your inventory and then hit cards up here as well. And this will show you cards that you own. I'm going to go ahead and stick with this portion for right now. So as you can see right now, I've got 5 cards equipped. First thing that you need to know about cards is you can only have one of each type equipped. With those 5 cards, their stats will collect together to be your overall card effects. The thing to keep in mind with your overall card effects is this number applies directly to each character. What I mean by that is if you look at the ignore defense stat, this 34%, if I close this, I can come over here to any character I own, such as Doctor Strange here, and I can go over here to his details page, and his ignore defense right now is 50%. Now it's gold because it's capped out. The plus 4%, 4.71% is overcapped, so his ignore defense is technically 54.71. However, only 50 applies because that's the cap. 34% from the cards directly affects this number, meaning if you adjust that ignore defense by even, let's say I was to adjust it by 15%, that would drop Doctor Strange below his cap, and this affects all characters. This is why it is so critical and important to have a well-built card set, because it affects all of your characters. This is also why it's important to understand how cards are built, because if you don't understand the concept of building your cards, the advice folks will give you might not necessarily work for your account. So things to keep in mind is like, what ISO 8 sets are you using? What is your 4th gear slot option? What sort of CTPs are you utilizing? What uniform options do you have equipped to your character? All of these will apply to your character's detail page. So be very, very aware of how your characters are built, and if they're built similarly, to know what sort of stats you need. Things to keep in mind like overdrive. What is that set bonus when you have it fully awakened? What are you actually getting built in? Ignore defense, 8.1% is built in with the ISO set. If you have something like Power of the Angry Hulk, then you're talking about some attack speed that's built in with the ignore defense. So again, be aware of stuff like that when you're looking at your cards. Your cards have a whole bunch of different stats here. Some of them have these additional bonuses that are outside in the green. Something a lot of players seem to neglect is card collections. So I'm going to go to the card collection tab at the top. You'll see some of these are highlighted in blue. And then if I go over here to the far right, some of them are grayed out. The reason for this is when you collect these cards in the collection and get them to 6 stars, it will then be permanently added to your collection, which means you can technically get rid of them if you're not going to use them technically. But if you complete a collection, like if I get the Luna Snow card here at 6 stars, I will have a permanent 3% bump to my attack speed for my account. That's for all of the characters. That will show in your viewed card stats here. The attack speed you see is a 3%. It would be a 6% if I complete that collection. If I scroll over here, you'll look through some of these collections that I've already completed, and there's actually one of these in here that has the attack speed already completed. Where is it at? Right here. So I have completed this set. That's that 3% green number. So those green numbers are basically card collections that you've already completed. So that's something else to keep in mind. Now I can uncheck that if you just want to see the base ones. Obviously checking it, you see it does two things. It says 16.5%, but if I do collection effects, it shows the green number and what the attack speed has become. So without the collection bonus, it's 16.5% from my cards. With the collection bonus, it's actually 19.5%. So the first thing to mention is these card collections are very critical because they give a permanent boost regardless of what you have equipped. So the two things to keep in mind: you have to get the card to 6 stars to have it filled in. And when you do, you go to this page, there'll be a little red dot. You have to click it. It'll make that red dot go away. It's just to alert you that you've completed a collection, and that does a permanent boost. So you'll see here I have 3 more to complete. But I've got permanent boosts, critical damage, cooldown, all attack, attack speed, ignore defense, energy defense, physical. I've got all of these different collections completed, so it's very important to work on collections. Now, coming back here to the equipped cards. So you get that concept, I hope, now. Card collection is important. It does permanent stat boost. You can see them all over the place here in green. The next thing to keep in mind is, what are the primary stats? What should you focus on? First of all, there are active effects that are not too bad to consider. However, let's talk about the base stats, because active effects can be random. It can be a random last stat on some cards. But you'll see different ones here. Let me go through each of them and talk about what I find to be most important, and then you can build according to how you have your character set up. Keep in mind with this, there are PvP stats, player versus player, and there's PvE stats, or player versus environment. PvP, which are things like Timeline or Alliance Conquest, is where your characters are fighting other people's characters. Then there's PvE, where you're essentially playing by yourself. ABX, World Boss Ultimate, GBR. You're doing as much damage as possible. You don't care about the effects of what your opponents can do to you. So with that in mind, let's talk about a few of these stats. So debuff stats. Crowd control time. Honestly, it's not an effect most people will build for either. I mean, you might consider it for some PvP, but I don't consider it something that you should build your cards with. Cooldown duration is critical. Definitely one of the primary stats, in my opinion, and you should have it, in my opinion, at least at 30%, if not higher. Cooldown is obviously how quickly your skills cool down, so you want that capped. The cap on that one is actually 50%. So if you can get a 50% cooldown for all your characters, that's important for rotations. Movement speed. Not necessarily something I would ever focus on for cards. If you have it, you have it, but moving your character around a little bit quicker is not going to make or break your account, in my opinion. All of the resists can be categorized together. They are a niche type of resist defense thing, so I wouldn't focus on those at all. Honestly, they're bad stats to have with your cards. You want to avoid them if you can. You might end up with them on occasion, that's fine, but I would put all the resists together as not needed. Recovery rate. Recovery rate, in my opinion, is a PvP focus stat. It's okay. It's not a primary stat. It shouldn't be your main focus. It is going to help certain characters that have the ability to regenerate. Consider Wolverine, Ladypool, anyone who has built-in healing of some form, Hulk. So some characters it'll affect, some it won't. And remember, your cards are universal, so it's better to focus, in my opinion, on stats that'll help your whole roster versus ones that only help a few characters in certain situations. Both energy and physical defense, in my opinion, again, they seem to be more PvP focused for the most part, but I wouldn't build those either. Those are kind of stats down there with the resists. It's okay to have, but there's other stats that are more important to focus on, especially for PvE. So again, in PvP, might not be bad to have some of those, but honestly, the effect seems to be negligible. So I think it's better right now with the current meta, most effective tactic available. The current meta seems to be about dealing as much damage as possible, even in a PvP setting. Max hit points. This is a PvP stat, hands down. If you're playing mostly PvE, I wouldn't even worry about it. If you are focusing more on PvP, you might consider building it. It is very helpful to have a larger hit point pool. More hit points you have, harder it is for you to be killed. And if you have characters who regen, there's a bigger pool for them to refill. So good stuff there. All defense is much better than physical or energy defense, but again, it falls into the category of that defense and survivability, more of a PvP thing, so I wouldn't necessarily focus on that. Dodge. Dodge is okay. However, again, not a primary stat, and mostly you're going to be wanting to work on dodge for your rage characters, because rage, you should have your crit rate and your dodge maxed out at the 75% cap. Dodge just helps you get out of the way of being attacked. Again, more PvP focused. It doesn't necessarily help all characters, because not all characters have rage. You might not have all characters in a PvP setting. So honestly, it's something I probably wouldn't build. It's not bad to have. It definitely can help capping for characters who need it, but it's not a primary focus in my opinion. Concentration increased. I'm really not sure about the additional pierce damage and the concentration increase. They're newer stats with the new card system. Right now with the boycott going on, I haven't even partaken with it, but they're there, so I don't have an opinion on them at this time. Ignored dodge. This obviously, if folks are dodging and you're constantly missing them because they're too much out of the way, consider Corvus or Quicksilver, something like that, this could be helpful. But again, not a primary stat, something I would avoid for your cards. Ignore defense. This is one of the 3 primary stats in my opinion. Ignore defense is critical for all characters to be capped at 50%. Ignoring defenses cuts through any sort of defenses they have. Without this, your character will not be able to do max damage. Regardless of PvP or PvE, max this stat at all costs, in my opinion, minimum 30% in my opinion. Energy attack, physical attack, all attack. This would be the 3rd primary stat in my opinion. I group them together for one reason. All attack will apply for both physical and energy. So all attack is the one to go for. However, physical and energy still apply, but it only applies to characters with physical or energy attack. The easiest way to see that is to open any character and right here, energy attack. If I was to go through a couple of these, most of them are energy attack. This one's physical attack. So this first stat here is going to be energy or physical depending on the character. So when you're thinking of building your cards up, be aware of that the all attack will help everyone. Physical only helps physical, energy only helps energy. So be aware of that. But the great thing about all attack, physical attack, and energy attack, they do not cap. So if you cap all your other stats, you can go nuts on this one. I likewise think this should be at least a 30%. 47.6 is pretty juicy in my opinion. The higher you can get that, the better. It's just going to help pump out that damage. Critical damage and critical rate are both, in my opinion, stats that are good to have. However, again, critical rate seems to be more focused for characters such as ones that have rage, but it's not going to hurt in a PvE setting mostly, but PvP, it's about dealing that damage more often. How often do you hit critically? And the critical damage, obviously, is good to have as well. Critical rate caps at 75%, critical damage caps at 200%. So if you're having a lot of characters and you're finding it very difficult to cap those stats, having them there in your cards are not bad. I don't focus on them as a primary stat, but they're still good. The last stat is attack speed. Attack speed, I would almost consider the 4th most critical stat. So if you think of ignore defense as your main one, cooldown duration is your secondary, all attack I feel like is your 3rd, attack speed would probably be the 4th. And I do know I mentioned physical attack and energy right under all attack, but I'd probably push attack speed up a little bit because all attack is more important than individualized ones. Your attack speed is how often you're hitting. It's still a niche type of a situation, so it's only going to affect certain characters more than others, such as any character that's hitting repeatedly. So one of your characters that just hit once with their skills, it's not necessarily going to help as much. However, certain characters like Sharon Rogers or Cable or Moon Knight, they'll have chain hits or multiple attacks with one skill. They'll hit over and over and over again. This allows them to get more attacks in. So this is actually a very important stat because it helps deal more damage as well. So I would say attack speed probably should be around 20 or 30, maybe. It's a hard stat to kind of cap, but just something to keep in mind. So these are your overall stats. So when you're going through, let's look about equipping cards. There are a few things to consider now that we understand the basic stats, what's most important. Ignore defense, cooldown, all attack, attack speed. Again, my opinion, and it's going to be based upon your characters, but that would be my focus and my advice to you. So let's talk about all these cards that can be equipped. We're going to start focusing on what's the difference between them and how you get the most out of them. So to begin with, you can have a 1-star to a 6-star. Don't equip anything below a 6-star. You can combine cards together by going to your cards, and then you can go as an example, if I go up here to my inventory and I go to cards, I can hit upgrade all, and you can kind of combine them all together. Be careful here. If you have a card that you've not put into a set, so check this out. Something you can do, you want to make sure that any of the cards you're going to get rid of, you're going to combine ones that you don't need. So if you need to, lock them. If you click on a card and you get a card info, you'll see there's a card by itself. That's because this is not part of a collection. If I click on this one and go to card info, you see all the cards at the bottom. If it's not colored and it's black and white, that means you have not completed it yet. So you probably want to lock at least one of those. You definitely want to complete your card collections first, as I mentioned. The other thing to keep in mind is as you're combining these together, it's going to take you quite a few to combine. So if I go here and I do upgrade, you'll see here it takes 5 cards of the same star level to increase it to the next one. So if you don't have enough, you can't. So you could do it manually. Once you start locking the cards you need, it's okay to do the upgrade all. Just be aware that you might lose cards that you didn't mean to lose if you're not careful. As you upgrade these cards, they'll get more and more stars. The 6 stars are going to unlock all of the stats, and it's also going to put them higher, as high as they can be for the secondary stats. The primary stats, and this is the difference between a normal card and a P card, your primary stats are affected by your quality. This is a quality 5. You see this little diamond down here, 6, 7, 4, 3. The max quality is 7. That's why the cable card is glowing like this. You want to try to hit that. However, you can combine and re-roll cards and their stats. The way that you do that is you go to your inventory, you go to the card that you want, and then you would hit, for example, if I wanted to re-roll this card, you would go to card info, you would go to combine. When you combine, you pick any other card you want, and you hit the combine. What that does is it randomly changes your stats on your card. All of them. Right now, there's no way to lock those. So this card's gone, but the card on the left gets new stats and a new quality. As you re-roll your cards, you try to get them stronger. Like I said, ultimately you do want that 7, but there's a few things to keep in mind. The first thing to consider is the type of card itself and its primary stats. All base cards have 2 primary stats that are locked. These never change. For the Loki card, which is one of the best free-to-play cards in my opinion, all attack and cooldown. Remember we talked earlier about the 3-4 primary stats? Cooldown and all attack were 2 of those. Those will never change. No matter how many times I re-roll this, those are locked in place. Those primary stats are what are affected by this 6, this quality. When it's 7, it's 11%. When it's 1, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I could probably check one of the cards that I have to try to figure that out. I'm pretty sure I've got a 1. I don't have any 1 stars. Let's see. No, I have a 1 quality here. Do I have any 1 quality that's a 6 star? Here we go. So here's a 6 star 1 quality. So it can be a 7.5% up to a 7 star quality, which is an 11% on this top 2 stats. 7.5, 11. So obviously having that 11 boost is more important if you can, but be aware of this. The secondary numbers here, the random options, the blue ones, will change every time you re-roll. If you want to see what they will change to, this ignore defense, as we mentioned, is one of the primary stats. We also have energy attack. The other 2, as I mentioned earlier, are kind of fill-ins, so not as important, but the energy and the ignore defense are. So if I click this question mark, anything that's listed under this question mark can fit into the first slot randomly as you re-roll. If I go to the next one, do you see how they're all different? There's an activation rate one, which would be on the right-hand side, as I mentioned, when the viewing all card effects. This one here can be one of these. This one here can be one of these. So be aware of that. So you can't have all ignore defense because ignore defense can only be in the first slot. I also can't get dodge in any of their slots because it's only the first one. So be aware of that, what you have the potential to re-roll them to. So you have to kind of weigh, okay, I re-rolled this. It's completely random, as Marvel Future Fight is known for. Is this beneficial for my account or not? Again, the top 2 here only change with the quality. Re-rolling them will change that, but you will always have all attack and cooldown regardless. The difference between a base card and a P card is the P card has a 3rd stat, which is locked. All attack, cooldown, ignore defense. Wait a minute. That sounds like the main 3 that I told you to focus on. This is one of the reasons why the Cable card is considered one of the best cards in the game. Note something here. The first 2 stats are at 11% because the quality is at 7, but the third stat, Ignore Defense, is at 5.1. The third stat doesn't go up with quality, only the first 2 do. The benefit of the P card is, first of all, now with the reforging system of the cards, you can get the stars with one of the colors and have additional stats beyond these, but it also has the ability to have a third stat, which is also locked in, so you don't lose that as well. Now you're only randomly doing 3 other stats versus 4 other stats. Something else to keep in mind. As I go through these, you'll notice I have other P cards. I have all P cards attached besides for the Loki. And as you go through these, again, the top 3, so this 8.5% is because of the quality 3. And then this all attack is 5.1, 5.1, 5.1. So you see some consistency there on that next stat. That fourth stat is always 5.1. You'll also see the stats below, the first one, right? 5.1, 5.4, 5.7, and 6. Those are all the same on that percentage across the cards. Actually, it looks like, yep, on every single one of those, you'll notice that those percentages are the same based upon what row they're in. So be aware of that too when you're looking at all of these. The other thing to think about, besides for whether or not you have a P card, is consider the P cards that are better or worse based upon what stats are locked. As I'd mentioned, Cable has 3 primary stats locked in forever. Now, I have a physical attack, which is great to have. The other 2, not so good. But this is a quality 7, so I probably don't want to re-roll it. Because if I do, if I was to get a 7% or something, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 4% drop on my all attack and cooldown, yeah, I don't think I'd want to re-roll this. It sucks that the secondary stats aren't that great, but again, that's something you need to keep in mind. A lot of people will keep a base card that's good and re-roll their secondary cards like duplicates. You'll see here I have a duplicate of the Black Panther, and they might re-roll some of these until they see better secondary stats. Like, look at this. I've got an all attack of 9.5, a cooldown of a 9.5, then I have critical damage, critical rate, ignore defense, and attack speed. This is a fantastic card, but the quality is 5. The one that I have equipped is a quality of 4. So I might want to replace that. So one of the things that I could do is I could come here into my inventory, card info, and hit equip. And I'm going to say, okay, I have it locked because I don't want to get rid of it. So if I was to replace it, I would look side by side. So what am I gaining? What am I losing? All attack goes up by 0.5. Okay, that's not as impressive anymore. 0.5 stays the same. So I'd be swapping out max hit points for critical rate. I'd be swapping out ignore defense for ignore defense. Okay, that would stay the same. I'd be swapping out attack speed for attack speed, which would stay the same. So essentially, I'd be swapping out the max hit points for critical rate. And I'd be getting an extra 0.5. This is something that kind of makes sense. I might want to do that. I'm not going to right now because I'd be losing a P card, but this is something that I'd have to weigh. What do I want more, max hit points or critical rate? And it's 5%. So that's the type of things you want to look at and compare to the cards that you have equipped. So sometimes it's a huge change that makes no sense. Sometimes it's a huge change that's great. This card over here. Oops, yeah, I can't equip 2 of the same card because I'm trying to equip. Let me get out of the trying to equip. This card over here has all 3 attacks in the top, but I also have attack speed and ignore defense below. Even though it's a quality 3, I chose to equip this. Probably would have been better off continuing to re-roll it, but right now I don't want to lose attack speed or ignore defense because I talked about those caps, and this would drop me below that target range of 30% for the ignore defense. So I probably don't want to do that because it will affect all of my characters. So hopefully that helps you, gives you some insight into how cards work, how you want to build them, and something to consider and weigh. So when you're going to do a replacement, when you're going to do a build, keep these in mind, do some research, think before you change anything, use that card Excel sheet that does the calculations for you, and do a comparison to see how your stuff will end up in the long run. Hopefully this was useful. If it was, remember to thumb up, like, and subscribe. I stream on Twitch. Feel free to check out my Twitch stream. Come hang out sometime. Thanks for watching. Have a great one.